Are you ready for rapid fire, Jess?
I am ready for some rapid fire.
Let's do it. I've saved up some of these questions about Michigan because we're going to talk about the sign stealing coming up here in a little bit. Fill in the blank on this first one, though. Notre Dame is a blank team with 4 games to go this season.
Whew, that is a tough one. Notre Dame is a team with a lot of a lot left to play for with 4 games left to go in the season. I was thinking about this the other day, actually, when I'm talking to some friends. Like Notre Dame, quite honestly, is just a couple ticks away from being 7-1, 8-0. All depending on how you look at it. Like obviously Louisville was a bad game, but there were some plays in there that if they broke Notre Dame's way here and there, that they could very easily have won that game. And obviously everyone knows about Ohio State. So like, obviously you got to put those things behind you. But I still think Notre Dame is a super talented team. And I think they have a great opportunity with 4 games left to really end out the season strong and end up with double-digit wins. And as long as they keep winning and these teams keep dropping ahead of them, they should easily find themselves in the top 10 at the end of the season.
Yeah, I think that Notre Dame is a good team that still has a lot of room to get a heck of a lot better here down the stretch. I mean, the defense is pretty close to lights out right now. They held USC to close to a third of their point total, what they usually average in that game. And obviously, Caleb Williams had never had a 3 interception game before in his career. Offense just has to find its groove. They got to average, better than 2.9 yards a carry like they have the last 2 games. They're too good for that. We just talked about that a little bit. It's interesting that James brings this up because I was thinking about this as well. He says Hartman is afraid of throwing an interception. And Sam Hartman, to me, is like Maverick in the original Top Gun. I said this to Vince at some point in the first half before he threw the touchdown pass to Chris Tyree. I said Hartman won't engage. It's like he's gun shy or something. And like, is he afraid to throw an interception? What is it that's holding Sam Hartman back right now? Because he has not thrown, there have been some opportunities where he has just not wanted to engage and make that long throw downfield. Now we saw him make the attempt, a couple of attempts against Duke. They weren't caught by either Tyree or Tobias Merriweather. But again, by and large, it's just like he does not want to throw the ball deep for whatever reason. What do you think about this?
I think it's a Marcus Freeman philosophy. I think that he is told not to turn the ball over.
So do you think like it's like back to the old days with Ian Book, basically? Like it's so beat into him. Don't throw don't turn the ball over. Don't throw an interception.
I think when he was at Wake Forest, he had more liberty because they needed more out of him offensively, right? Like they needed him to make those plays. But I think I think Notre Dame has deep shots built into these plays. But I think if it's not there the first look, I just don't think that they want him throwing 50-50 balls or contested balls. And so rather than throwing it downfield, they would much rather him check down, and live to fight another down or live to fight another series. And if that means, going, 3 and out or maybe gaining a first down and then having to punt, I just think that they would much rather do that than giving the ball to the other team in plus territory.
Interesting. I mean, he definitely, like, to me, he seemed like a different guy after throwing that first interception against Louisville. Like to me, that's what, people were trying to read into his body language and some of that stuff the rest of the Louisville game. To me, I just think that he started getting into his head. Definitely by the time he threw the second interception, he was much more gun shy. And again, like a guy who's having trouble engaging right now because like he's seen the other side of it. And, if that's being kind of drilled into him, protect the ball, don't turn it over, those kind of things, you're just not going to see a guy take that.
Well, I think shots, also
chances. And especially you've got to trust your receivers as well.
I was going to say, I think he's got trust issue with his wide receivers because that ball that he threw to Rico Flores didn't, try to fight or go up for the ball 50-50. And when you're working with some of these young wide receivers, they might read it, differently than what Sam Hartman is, right? Like if as a wide receiver, if you read something, you basically have, 2 routes, right? Like depending on what coverage is given to you. And so if he doesn't trust his wide receivers, these younger guys, to make those in-play reads, I think that also has to do with it at the same time. So I think, part of it is Marcus Freeman's overall mantra of we're not turning the ball over. And then second of all, just this young group of wide receivers that are in and out recently. And especially that interception to Rico Flores against Louisville, there was just no fight from Rico Flores. He didn't do anything to help Sam Hartman out. And so he's like, well, I'm not going to throw those kind of 50-50 balls anymore if my wide receivers aren't going to help me out.
But it's interesting because Marcus Freeman was talking yesterday about Tobias Merriweather and was saying that they need to throw him more 50-50 balls. Don't just throw to him when he's wide open. Go to Tobias more. We're going to talk about Tobias here.
Well, and Joe says Hartman deserves some of the blame. I disagree with that because at Wake Forest, he was cutting the ball loose. So what if it was truly on Sam Hartman, it would be him chucking the ball up and getting intercepted against Notre Dame. I just don't think in this offense he has to do that.
And let's not forget, he's only had one really bad game. It's not like he's had a series of horrible games. Now, he has not been his best these last 4 games, but they've also played the 4 best teams on the schedule in these last 4 games. But he still only had the one bad turnover game. I do think that some of the chemistry comes into play. Some of it's on Hartman, but it just does feel like he has, again, sort of withdrawn to an extent, just in terms of what he's willing to do and take some chances. Fill in the blank. It's blank on the subject of these receivers that Rico Flores is now ahead of Tobias Merriweather on Notre Dame's depth chart for this week's game.
It is very surprising that Rico Flores is already ahead of Tobias Merriweather because last season, my biggest criticism of Tobias and why I figured he wasn't on the field is he didn't have the trust of the coaches and he didn't know what was going on 100% of the time. And now enters Rico Flores, who is, basically in Tobias's shoes from last season, and he's already on the field getting much more playing time than Tobias Merriweather. Here, I'm just going to go out and say it. As soon as I saw this, I didn't think it was a good thing for Tobias, and I ultimately would not be shocked if towards the end of the season we see his name in that transfer portal. Because listen, if you are supposed to be kind of the next guy at wide receiver, and now you're already getting passed up by guys younger than you, I just don't think that bodes well. I think you're starting to see, why the running back that transferred to LSU, he ended up Logan Diggs. He saw the incoming freshman talent coming behind him. Like they already have Faison, they have Rico Flores, they have Jaden Greathouse, and then that doesn't account for some of these other stud wide receivers that are coming in the next recruiting classes, right? And so I just ultimately think if Tobias is getting passed up right now already by a true freshman, I just don't think that's a good look for him down the road. And I wouldn't be surprised if you saw him, potentially pack it up.
Well, at some point, I'm not going to go that far, but at some point, the performance has to meet the talent level. This is an ultra talented guy, but the performance, especially in these last 3 games, has not met the talent level. And that's where he's got to get to. Like you talk about Hartman throwing that 50-50 jump ball to Rico Flores. Like, okay, so part of that is on Sam Hartman. Part of that is on Rico Flores. Part of that is also on the play design and the play call in that situation, because that is not like Rico is good a freshman, as Rico is. That's not the guy who I'd want going up for a 50-50 ball just based on his body type. Now, if I look at Tobias Merriweather's body type, that's the guy I want going up for it. But again, does performance meet the talent level? It hasn't, because he has had some of those situations where he can fight for the ball, and he's, kind of been in the, in that kind of not necessarily true jump ball, but like that deep ball where he was called for the pass interference. Then he ended up dropping it against Duke. I mean, that's about as close to a 50-50 ball right there. He didn't make the catch. He's had some opportunities. Like, I think maybe what you're hoping is you just got passed by a freshman. He's talented too, but so are you, Tobias Merriweather. And the talent has to start, or the performance has to start meeting that talent level. And maybe this motivates him a little bit. I don't know. Like, something needs to happen, I think, between the ears for him to kick it in gear, because we've said all along the talent's there, but the performance has to meet it at some point, and it just hasn't met it. So something has to be the motivator, and maybe this is the motivating factor for him when you get past officially on the depth chart.
Yeah, to me, there's no other form of kick in the butt motivation than seeing someone pass you up on the depth chart in the middle of the season. So yeah, someone also kind of referenced it in the chat. I just don't know about Tobias Merriweather's inner drive, or like that mentality that he has of being a competitor, and those sort of things. And hopefully, maybe he gets to the point of realizing that the talent, you have to put in even more hard work, and that, the talent and work that he's put in already isn't quite enough.
See, and this what I'm going to say is not a knock on him, because there are a lot of talented guys who have fallen prey to this, especially when you're coming out of high school and you're told how great you are, and you go out on the field and you prove that you're great in high school. But as you know, it's something else when you go to the next level, and you can't just always get by on being the most talented guy in the room. There still has to be some work that goes with it, and the desire that goes with it to be truly great. And that, I think that's just where Tobias has to be right now. Is he willing to put in the work and, motivate himself to some extent to go be that guy? Because he can absolutely be it. It's just a matter of putting it together. Fill in the blank. It's blank that during his press conference this week, Pitt head coach Pat Narduzzi was asked about penalties being called both ways in games. Had nothing to do with Notre Dame, but he decided to reference what he thought was a missed pass interference call the last time his team visited Notre Dame 5 years ago.
I thought it was hilarious. And the reason I thought it was hilarious is because of how just rent-free it seems to be that Notre Dame is living inside of his head. Because if you can, basically spin a question to be about Notre Dame from 5 years ago,
right,
and you keep consistently losing to Notre Dame in close games, that's what you're going to think about. And so it is clear that he is not a fan of Notre Dame. It is clear that it bothers him that he can't beat Notre Dame. And so what does he do? He started immediately throwing shade or deflecting blame on other aspects of the game. And it was funny because I saw some people quote tweet this earlier in the week and were like, are you referencing this call where Notre Dame's wide receiver is getting held? Or are you referencing
Miles Boykin?
Yeah, that call, or, what is it? But it's clear that Pat Narduzzi feels like he is up against the refs when playing Notre Dame, and it adds to his frustration when he can't beat Notre Dame.
If there was a dictionary definition of the term living rent-free in your head, it would have a picture of Pat Narduzzi, and there would be like a thought bubble with Notre Dame inside of it, because this guy, anytime that he gets, the guy hates Notre Dame. Every chance that he gets, he throws shade at Notre Dame. He's always complaining about Notre Dame not being in the conference. They're in, they're out. I'm surprised that didn't come up this week. He accused Notre Dame of trying to use back channels to get Kenny Pickett to transfer to Notre Dame a few years back when Kenny Pickett was still playing for the Panthers. It's just, he's always got something. And I don't know if it's because of his days at Michigan State, when Notre Dame and Michigan State were playing, when he was still defensive coordinator there, like if that's where it started, or if it runs even to, like, was he not recruited by Notre Dame at some point? He thought he should be. I don't know. But the guy he hates Notre Dame. And like, it's a bold strategy here. Like, is he calling out the officials when in fact, they're going to be ACC officials for this game this weekend, because that's what they're going to be. It's, it's an ACC team. So they're going to use ACC officials again for this game. So like, is he calling them out when he could maybe, end up bringing, some heat back on himself? Or is he kind of throwing it out there, kind of trying to put it into these ACC officials' heads that, he needs them to be working in his favor out there, kind of thing? I don't know. But Pat Narduzzi, like, this is Pat Narduzzi's week, man, because he is anti-Notre Dame, and it is full speed ahead. He gets to play Notre Dame this weekend at Notre Dame.
I don't know if you saw last night in the Vikings and 49ers game. I don't know how much of that game you caught. But at one point, right before the play, Kevin O'Connell is seen like telling the referee to watch this player for the Vikings because he thinks there's going to be a penalty. And sure enough, that player gets tugged on or whatever. So it's like holding, defensive pass interference. That just reminds me of like Pat Narduzzi, I guess is what I'm getting at. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the referee's ears all the time, be like, hey, you need to watch for this guy. Hey, you need to watch for that guy, right? Rather than just being, being in the game and not getting caught up in the things that he can't necessarily control.
Yeah. John said that the officials were horrible or terrible, I guess is his word, in the Wake Forest Pitt game. I didn't get to see any of that, but I'm not surprised because the level of officiating has just been bad overall this year. Michael wants to know who hates Notre Dame more, Narduzzi or Pat Fitzgerald. I mean, it might be close, but I would give Narduzzi the edge in this case. Salty said the biggest factor in Notre Dame's elevation of play from Louisville to USC, Pac-12 officials in the USC game. And I mean, USC's leaving the Pac-12, so could be something to that as well. Okay, so we've reached the time. We're going to talk about it. The Michigan sign stealing scandal. How big a deal is this? Do you buy or sell it as a big deal?
So I buy this as a big deal. And there's been a lot of commentary the last few days about the significance of this, right? Like, is it a big deal? Is it not a big deal? Because at this point, it is obvious that Michigan did things to steal signals, right? Like, it is very obvious at the point that they had a guy dedicated on staff to steal signs, right? Okay, the thing I would say is, and what a lot of people are saying, especially if you're a Michigan fan, is everyone steals signs. It's not an uncommon thing. But what I would say, and the reason why I think this is a big deal is I'm completely fine with in-game. If you're looking over to the other team's sideline, you're looking to the other team's dugout, looking wherever, trying to steal signs. That is completely fine. That is in-game.
Yep.
That is game tactics. Where it becomes an issue is where you are going to events outside of live games, you are recording other teams' sidelines, and you are clearly studying the tape to see what certain signals mean. Because, I mean, another tweet came out today. Guy had a laminated sheet of basically, whoever a person doing some sort of signal, and it has a tree going down of, okay, if it's this signal and this signal and this signal, we know that is this play. So again, I don't care if you sign steal in game, that's part of the game. But when you're doing things outside of the actual game to manufacture or to steal signs, that's where it becomes an issue. And that's where the NCAA is going to crack down, because Michigan could afford to pay someone $55,000 a year to go steal signs. Freaking Rice, they don't have that kind of luxury. So that becomes a competitive advantage for Michigan.
Yeah, like Joe says, past 2+ years, Michigan's defense has dominated the Big Ten, but was dominated in the playoffs. Very peculiar. And look, this is every bit as big a deal as the Houston Astros sign stealing scandal. And it's because of what you said. Just like you said, Michigan fans, they want to say, well, everyone does it. But it's one thing to steal signs organically when you're just, standing on the other sideline or up in the press box in the game itself. But it is completely different when you bring technology into it. And that's what the Astros did. They brought technology into it. They went beyond just sitting in the dugout and looking at the third base coach or the manager giving signs. They were using technology to relay signs, to batters at the plate and doing all these different things. And look, here's a little shocker for you, Michigan. It's against the rules to go to a game and videotape someone else's, to use video of any kind sitting in the stands and use that as a scouting tool. And Jim Harbaugh is trying to use this whole plausible deniability. I didn't know anything about it. This is just, like Desmond Howard's out there trying to say that this is a rogue coach doing his own thing. I mean,
come on.
Like you said, there's video of this guy now. Like, it seems like by the minute more stuff is coming up because there's like TV video from the Ohio State Michigan game, and it's part of what you're talking about. Like Ohio State starts to change the sign, and then you see you can see this guy standing next to the defensive coordinator, Jesse Minter, by the way. You can see him. He's like going out of his way, like, what's the sign going to be? Then so he sees the signs, and then they relay real quickly because he knows the signs because they've been sitting there with videotape stealing them, like it's
I mean,
not
how
just that
many
he's stealing,
times how many times do you see a 55,000 staffer standing next to the OC and the DC live in the game 24/7? Like
they're usually sitting up in the press box.
There's only people with special privileges are right next to the OC and the DC on the sideline consistently.
The guy left a paper trail. 11 different Big Ten schools have come forward and said that he bought tickets using his own name. And apparently, like, there's all these Venmo transfers where like people are saying t-shirt purchase, like $500 t-shirt purchase or whatever, and it's like, I what would really be funny is if, he tried to turn in the receipts for these tickets, or if he did end up getting reimbursed for these tickets by Michigan as well. But it's just incredible. Like, again, it's against NCAA rules to scout in person. That, like, you can get all the game film that you want. That's like, it's definitely against NCAA rules to use technology to record a different team's signals. So going back to what you started with, you can say, well, everybody steals signs. In the game itself, that's fine, but you can advance scout and use technology to record this stuff. Like any TV station, any fan can record this stuff, but as soon as a member of a team starts using it to try to gain an advantage, it's against the rules. It's just against the rules.
My phone unfortunately died, but there was a stat that there was this great TikTok this morning, and the last slide was Michigan's record against the spread before the sign stealing and after the sign stealing. And they go from a losing percentage without the sign stealing to like a 10 game, 15 game above 500 with the sign stealing. Like that, come on.
I'm surprised.
How do you, that's direct correlation. When you know what's coming, it's easy to defend when you know exactly what's coming.
I mean, they hadn't beaten Ohio State prior to the sign stealing.
Right. And it's like, is it coincidental that Harbaugh saw a resurgence in his career magically right around the time that this sign stealing stuff started to happen? Like, it's just not hard to put piece together. Unfortunately, Michigan and is going to try to decline and say Harbaugh had no, interaction with this or no knowledge that it was going on. I mean, that's complete garbage to me. And I just, Harbaugh was shopping the NFL. And depending on how this stuff goes with the NCAA, I think that, you might see at the end of the season that mutually sides have parted ways, or, whatever the terminology is, just because he'll be done with it, right? Like he's already kind of showed signs of wanting to be done with it, these past couple of seasons. I just really think if this goes ultimately really bad, he's just going to be, I'm done with the NCAA. I'm going to go back to the NFL and live my life.
Joe wants to know, how does the Big Ten handle the Michigan problem to save face for the conference? Do they ban Michigan from playing in the Big Ten championship game? Salty, should Harbaugh be removed as head football coach until the investigations are over? I do think you have to let the investigations play out and find out what they know. But, to your point where you were just talking about, as the head coach, you are responsible for, whatever if you have an assistant coach on your staff commit any violations, the head coach is ultimately responsible for them. I do think you have to let this play out and let, someone come to a conclusion. But again, like going back to the Houston Astros thing, both the manager and the general manager lost their jobs over that. And I think this is every bit as serious as that. I think the Big Ten, I don't think the Big Ten is going to take any action against Michigan during this season. I think if anything happens, it's all going to be retroactive. So I don't think anyone's going to be, removed during the season. I don't think anyone's going to, like the Big Ten is potentially going to keep Michigan out of the Big Ten championship game. I don't think they'll be left out of the playoffs, again, assuming they're in those positions. But I think after the fact, a lot can and should happen to both Harbaugh and his program for this.
Well, what's funny is naturally last season, the one game that they didn't have scouts at and steal signals, the TCU game,
the playoff, yeah,
and their defense looked abysmal against TCU, and they lost against a team that they probably should have beat, considering how they played the rest of the season. So it's just, again, nothing is coincidental in my opinion.
Results. I can.
Yeah, and I agree with Salty too. Harbaugh knew again. When the guy
100% knew.
When the guy stealing the signs is planted next to the defensive coordinator and is looking at the others, and they've got him on cameras looking at the other sideline to find out what, signals are being relayed into the field, and then he's telling the defensive coordinator what to call. Harbaugh absolutely knew about this. Again,
what do you think?
He can play the plausible deniability card and say that he didn't, but again, he's still ultimately responsible regardless. But he knew.
He knows.
There's no way he didn't know.
That's
why this guy is on the staff. He probably pitched himself as a guy who could do this kind of stuff.
Let me ask you this. Say the investigation doesn't conclude until the end of the season and Michigan goes on and wins a national championship. Do you think that it would be vacated? Do you think it would be removed? Or do you think it would just be an asterisk next to it?
I don't know. Good question. But, again, like going back to the tickets, the guy had tickets on both sides of the stadium for last week's Ohio State Penn State game. And guess what? The tickets
wasn't there.
Used. That's right. They didn't use the tickets.
Coincidence?
So, I mean, they're not going to be doing it the rest of the season. So we're going to find out pretty quickly just how much this actually meant to them. And, what now they probably got a pretty good base of, signals from some of these teams that they've already stolen signals from. But
people are getting so confused about how the signs were stolen. And that's the biggest thing that I would conclude this on is when you do it organically and you're just in game looking across the sideline or the dugout, that's completely fine. But when you're introducing technology, you're going to, you're flying to other games, you're videotaping, all of this stuff. It's like, it's a clear violation. I don't understand how people don't see the difference between the two.
Yeah. And like Joe said, guy making $55,000 a year, didn't pay for the tickets, hotel, airfare out of his own pocket, for these people to go to these games. There's a money trail someplace, getting reimbursed for all this. So, yeah. Yeah, I don't know what's going to I forgot. We've got a super chat from Tyler on this as well. What if Notre Dame was caught stealing signs? What do you think their punishment would be from the NCAA? I mean,
we saw what happened when they self-reported their academic tutoring issues a few years past, and that was enough to vacate wins. I think you would expect something similar, if not worse, in this situation.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately what he's getting at is that the hammer would be dropped harder on Notre Dame, and I don't disagree with that. I think that ultimately that's kind of what happens. But to me, the funny part is it being stuck in Michigan and Ohio and living in both states and hearing the fans butt heads with each other. Michigan always takes the moral high ground when talking about Ohio State and just talking about how morally sound they are and how they don't stoop to certain levels that Ohio State does, and et cetera, and et cetera. All of that's out the window now. Michigan is morally corrupt, and I don't think they have anything to stand on now at all.
Completely agree. Fox Sports analyst Emmanuel Acho says Caleb Williams should consider sitting out the rest of the season because the Heisman is now a long shot. Playoffs are an even less likely option, and he won't play in a bowl game anyway. Quote, the risk of playing far outweighs the reward business decision, end quote. Do you buy or sell it, Jess?
This was a big fat sell to me. I was actually infuriated when I read this tweet by Acho because, first of all, it's just like, how are you now to say just because a couple things are going wrong that it's just no longer worth it to play these remaining games, right? Because ultimately what you're saying is if USC hadn't won these games and they were still undefeated, magically the risk of not getting injured goes down because you're still going to play the remainder of the season, right? And so even if you're undefeated or at 2 losses, if you're playing that remainder of the season undefeated, those are still games that you can potentially get hurt and you have no control of whatever's going on. And so that argument, one, goes out the door to me. And second of all, it's just you're basically creating an atmosphere in college where guys can say they can quit when things don't go their way anymore. Right. And how are you able to consciously say that when there is youth all around the country and the world watching football, right? And so now we're just teaching young players to quit just because they lose a couple games and, their status of going on to the next level might be in jeopardy. I just think it's a bunch of bullcrap at the end of the day. And I think Acho should be ashamed of himself for even tweeting something like that.
I completely agree. Where's the accountability? And Acho is a guy who played in college. Obviously, he played in the NFL for a time. And is it all just a business decision, or is there any accountability, for Caleb Williams? Now, obviously, he's not just throwing in the towel, but I think it's ridiculous that Acho, would even come out.
He just started the conversation. He planted an idea that had no reason of even being brought up. Like that should never be a conversation.
Yeah, Lauren says that Caleb should at least fake an injury if he doesn't want to finish the season. And it's like which one of the Bosas a few years back. He just decided he wasn't going to come back and opted out for like half a season or something like that. And we've seen other guys just decide, well, I'm not going to risk it. And it's unfortunately it's happening more and more. And I'm kind of surprised that we haven't seen more of it. Like if you're being projected as a first round guy, I don't even know how much NFL teams take that kind of stuff into account anymore. Is it all the talent? And, especially when you're a quarterback and you're seen as the number one pick. But I think it's ridiculous that Acho would even float something out like this. Because there are literally thousands of guys who aren't going to be playing for one of the four teams who play in the national, in the college football playoff at the end of the season, but they're going to play the entirety of their season as long as they're healthy.
Yeah, like where's the sense of pride if you're Acho, right? Yeah. Like there's just I about threw my phone when I read that. I was just so mad because it's just teaching all of the wrong things at the end of the day.
Yep. So Alex Rodriguez says he's upset the Yankees didn't retire his jersey number 13 and allowed Joey Gallo to use it when Gallo played for the Yankees a couple years ago. A-Rod says his comments about the Yankees as a TV analyst likely kept it from happening. Do you buy or sell that?
I'm going to sell that the reason why it's not being, retired is because of specific comments that he's made about the Yankees. And the next thing I would like to say is I just think it's hilarious that they let Joey Gallo wear his number, right? Like of all people,
that's the funniest part
to me, because that's like a slap in the face. I agree with A-Rod. That's a slap in the face, allowing Joey Gallo to wear your uniform, right? Like if you're going to allow someone to wear 13, it better be like the next A-Rod, right? Like it should be what the Cowboys do with 88. It gets passed down to the next legacy guy of the organization. Right. But to just allow anyone to wear it, okay, I understand, A-Rod. I would be pretty upset about that too, considering how many years you were at the Yankees, all the success that you had, etc. But I don't think his comments as a TV analyst is what led to that decision. So that's why I'm selling it. I just don't know what that reason is, though, overall. I could speculate that maybe it's the steroid stuff. Maybe it's, that there hasn't been the best relationship between A-Rod and the Yankees ever since he's left. Maybe it's because he doesn't, love Derek Jeter the same way everyone does in the Yankee organization. Whatever it might be, I'm not sure. But I don't think it's just because he says some things here and there as an analyst, because that's his job. You can't just say nice things about the Yankees all the time.
Is there anyone who lacks self-awareness like A-Rod lacks self-awareness? I mean, or maybe he just tells himself.
Derek Jeter's up there from the other night when he didn't want to put on the cowboy hat with everyone else.
That's true. That's true. I mean, this is a 2-time steroid offender. Like, that's not the guy whose jersey this is the New York Yankees. Like, you are not. I don't think anyone ever considered retiring A-Rod's jersey number. But to me, the icing on the cake is just what we talked about. It's not just they didn't retire it; they let Joey Gallo wear the number. It's just hysterical. He was just not thought of in that reverence that he thinks he was thought of, you know? And you can say, well, he was in Jeter's shadow, and you're right. Like Jeter lacks some of it as well. It's like, come on, man. Poppy bought you the hat. Put the hat on. Put the cowboy
everyone
hat
else
on,
has
Jeter.
the hat on. They're laughing, joking around. He just looks at it like, oh,
Lighten up a little bit.
I'm not putting that on.
Yeah. Looked at it like it was the dumbest thing ever.
I think the combination of steroids and his I just don't think the poster child of that organization during that era was Jeter. And I think, unfortunately, that's the only person that's going to get praised consistently. And then you add in the fact that A-Rod was kind of, it looked at as the Robin to, Jeter's Batman, and you combine steroids. It's just, I don't see it changing.
But you just can't be one of the least liked guys around and think that they're going to retire your jersey number when it's all said and done.
Maybe you should do more things to maybe, get on better graces with the Yankees if he's that concerned.
So Elon Musk just celebrated the 1-year anniversary of buying Twitter, which is now, of course, known as X. But he plans to start charging users $1 a year to allow them to post on the platform. So if you want to post on Twitter, you're apparently going to have to pay $1 a year. You can still scroll through Twitter and read other people's posts for free. But if you want to post, you got to pay $1 for a year. So would you pay to post?
Yeah, I would pay to post. I think it's stupid. It's $1. Like, it's just another way to squeeze out millions of dollars, right? Because if every person owes $1, that's like the easiest $200 million that he's
well, I was going to say
right?
There's something like 550 million plus, Twitter X users. So if everybody did it, that's 550 million a year just for paying $1. And so,
just $1.
Yeah. So if half the people did it, then that's still over 200 million a year. So I can see why he do it, and it's relatively inexpensive. But
that's the whole reason it's happening is he can't make money. It's a money pit for him right now.
Right. That's exactly it. He's trying to find some way to make money at it. Lauren brings up a good point.
Yeah, when's it become $2?
Like if I would actually pay for it for 10 years. If you locked me in and said $10, do it for 10 years. If you're going to guarantee me that you're not going to increase the rate, I would also like some of those like extras to come along with it. Like the people, with the blue check marks with the 800, word posts and stuff like that but
listen, I sports wager probably consistently $50 to $100 every day. So I'm okay with paying $1. Like it's just a matter, like I give $1 to a homeless person, when I have the opportunity, right? Like,
right.
I don't care about $1, but it's just funny that he's doing it because he's so down bad and Twitter or X is losing him so much money and his investors are pissed.
Well, and look, you remember he tried to get out of it, but he had, signed all the paperwork and all that. Once he found out what kind of shape they were in financially and, the odds against actually making money, he tried to back out, but he was too far in at that point. So now he's just, again, this is actually one of the better decisions I think that he's made. Like $1 for a year is next to nothing. I think a lot of people would pay that. I will be curious if this actually goes through. Mr. 2.0 says Twitter is homeless. I will be curious to see how many people actually pay $1 a year.
Listen, I think Twitter, the statement Twitter is homeless is exactly what I enjoy about Twitter. Like, you go on there and you don't know what the heck you're going to see some days. But what I'm consistently on there is I love to see the current stuff about, NFL, MLB, the news, the NBA, players are hurt, players are traded, whatever's going on. That's what really keeps me into Twitter, because I need to know what's going on in the real world, right? But then you just see the funniest stuff on there at the same time. Just like you read something or see a meme, you're like, someone really put that out there. And I think that's the best part about Twitter is the combination of just knowing what you're going to get and then not knowing what you're going to get every single day.
True. All right, well, we're going to wrap it up with that tonight as we wind down another edition of the show. Joe says that he likes how Elon is trying to get rid of all the fake accounts, and if he can't, might as well make money off them. Yeah, like I think the bot farms are still a thing, though, right? Like,
Oh,
has he
I
really
get a
made a dent?
random I
Yeah,
get X-rated accounts that like my tweets, and I'm like, all right, that's a block immediately.
right. Exactly. All right, hit the like button on your way out. Appreciate you being here with us for the show, and we'll of course be back tomorrow. Subscribe, rate, and review, and we'll talk to you later on IB Nation Sports Talk.